Welcome back, guys, to another Tim Cain reaction. This one is how much should devs play? I have met developers who barely play any games, and I've met developers who play as many or more games than me, and trust me, the moment I go home after a hard day work, I sit down and I play games. And then I eat, and then I go to sleep, I wake up, I work, or I play games if it's the weekend. I'm playing games all the time. But how much should devs play? I don't know. You should at least play some games. You should at least play the games that are like your competition or your inspiration, right? If you're working on a game, you should play games that are competing with it so that you know what the market wants, what the market is expecting, right? If Baldur's Gate 3 is setting a bit of a new standard for CRPGs and turn-based RPGs, then you should try to know how Baldur's Gate 3 plays and what people like about Baldur's Gate 3. But I think that developers should play too, just because you're going to be up to date on what developers are doing to stay, up to date with technology, right? And software and methods of designing. Those things do shift over time. So I would say developers should play a lot.
Meet Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about how much devs should play.
Yeah, a lot.
This is kind of a continuation of a video I made a month ago, almost a year ago, called Playing Games, and I'll link it below. But it's me answering a question from viewer Amir Hussein Magsoudi 388, who asked, what is your opinion on keeping a clean palette? As in, you're working on something, don't look at what other people are doing. If you do look at what other people are doing, it might narrow your creativity. If you do look at what they're doing, you may learn things you never come up with. I guess this also goes for playing a game blind.
That's a really good question, because you might also want to, like for me, I might want to steer clear of some alchemy games so that I don't accidentally. It's weird, you're right. You don't want to copy somebody else's work, right? But you are making a derivative of, everything is derivative, right? Art is derivative. I think games are an amalgamation of your own expression as well as your past experiences with games, and you might even pull in ideas from genres that are completely different from the game you're making. I don't know, it's this weird thing where I don't want to play other alchemy games because I want to do my own thing, but I need to know enough about these games to know what they're doing that I think is successful or not successful. And that's kind of hard to explain. I don't know if anybody else is in game dev and if it kind of feels the same way.
Guess what? It also goes for working on a PhD thesis, because the advice I got from my thesis advisor in the early 90s was to look at enough other work to get a good foundation, but you don't have to look at all the work that's been done, because just because the work somebody did work in an area doesn't mean they did the right work.
Yep.
So his advice was understand what's been done, but don't worry about going in the same direction as someone else, because you're going to uncover different things. And I liked that answer, because this is kind of a big question. It applies to a lot more than just should a game dev play a lot of games or not, or should they play games while they're making, and I will get into all that. Overall, if you watch that Playing Games vid, you know what I said was, if you play too little games as a developer, you won't be able to see what gamers like or dislike.
Yep.
You won't be able to see where the trends are, even if you don't want to follow them. And also, and probably most importantly, is you don't see some pitfalls. Like, you may have thought that some feature was awesome. You're like, I had this great idea for a feature. And then you mention it and somebody goes, oh, this game does that. And you play that game and you're like, oh, I don't really like how that feature works once it's implemented.
I mean, you can also do that by watching games on Twitch, right? I watch a lot of Twitch even while I'm playing games, because then you can gauge really obvious reactions of, maybe an animation is really cool and people react to it. And it's like, okay, stuff like that people like. I mean, some of it is obvious, but there are other things that aren't as obvious, where if you see it being played by somebody else, or if you see reactions of a system that isn't very well enjoyed by the audience, you can kind of be like, okay, I should probably stay clear of that, right? Everything's a remix. For example, when you pitch, you totally say what your inspiration to others can understand. Yeah, I mean, you want people to have familiarity. We've talked about that before, and I think one of Tim Cain's videos, where what players want is not necessarily something new. What they want is something familiar, but still pushes into boundaries that they haven't explored yet. And so you when you're making a new game, you don't necessarily want to make something that is, it's very risky to make something that is just entirely new and never seen before. Even Minecraft, while, creating its own bit of, I guess, a genre, it felt like Legos. And so it was just like, oh, it's 3D Legos. I mean, that is already familiar. You're not making something that people haven't ever seen before. It's just you've taken a concept that was physical and you've made it digital. And, of course, they built Notch built the game up from there. But familiarity is really important because it sets expectations. It's like, oh, our game is, every time you say my game is an RPG is a bit of a tough one. Maybe let's say our game is an arcade game. You can kind of set expectations. Okay, this has a very short gameplay loop, very easy to understand gameplay. My progress probably isn't saved between each run. Things like that. There's something you can't explain, you just need to experiment. Yeah, that too. The amount of ideas you can come up with only to realize a month down the line that you actually got the idea from a game you played previously. Look at you, Shadow of War. Yeah, well, the Nemesis system, I wish we could take that, but patenting the Nemesis system, stupidest thing.
Maybe you have an idea of how to avoid it, but already that was a great thing because you saw a pitfall and you're like, I'm going to avoid that. If you can't think of something, then do another feature. But at least you didn't waste a lot of time on it. The flip side, though, is true. If you play too much, you can just get overwhelmed. So much stuff comes out every year. See the Steam video that I did, where this year in 2025, I think we're on schedule to have 25,000 new games.
Well, it's not even that. Like, today's Tuesday, right? Oops, don't do that. Let me pop over to Steam real quick. Popular upcoming releases. All upcoming releases. And we're going to hide anything that isn't a game. Today is April 8th. The end of the week, let's say Friday, April 11th. So anything before April 12th. These are all the games coming out before Saturday. Right here. Just on Steam. And you know what? Most of these people are never going to play. I mean, I guarantee most of these, none of us have ever heard of, that we're ever interested in. I mean, maybe we were, but we never heard about them. The Steam algorithm is very, very harsh. And that's just because so much stuff is coming out. Shout out to Talos Principle Awakened, actually. I mean, what can you do? What can you do? You either have to be really good at marketing, you need to hit the viral stride, and your game, can market itself naturally, or you need to ally yourself with somebody who has a presence that can market the game for you. There's a lot of games coming out, and there's no way that you can be expected to know or play all these games, even if you are only playing games and that's all you do 24/7. You're never going to be able to get all these. You're probably not going to have enough money for all of them.
A year. When you start to play too many games, your ideas feel commonplace. Like, oh, everybody's already done this, or somebody else already thought of this. I'm not even going to try doing it.
And I'll tell you what, if this was true, if people hear your game idea and say, oh, it's like this game, they can shut the hell up. Okay? It doesn't matter if you're the first on the market. What matters is that you either are the better game or you are the better marketed game. The very reason Movie Games is suing the creator of Schedule 1 is because they felt like he took their idea. And guess what? His game is played a hell of a lot more than Drug Dealer Simulator, whatever it was called. He just had either the better idea, the better art style. I mean, it could be any mix of these things. Maybe a bit of it was better designed. Maybe it ran better. It's multi-varied. But you don't need to be the first one on the market to be the highest selling one or the better one. And if you're making a game that is, it's somewhat live, not live, what am I thinking of? A live service game, right? Like an early access game is a bit of a live service thing. Even once it comes out, you don't have to keep updating it, but early access itself is a live service way of providing your product to people. Schedule 1 is live service, and he can keep updating it. He can adapt to people's desires on the fly with that.
And then you lose your will to even try.
Mm-hmm.
And or worse, the flip side happens and you see a lot of trends and you're like, well, I guess everybody likes this, and then you slavishly follow those trends. All of those are bad. Not doing something because people have done it, or only doing something.
99% of the time, if you're just a trend follower, you will end up in obscurity. I mean, and what are you really doing? Like, I guess if you're just trying to copy mechanics to prototype because you're trying to learn more about game dev, fine. But if you're trying to make a commercial success, if you're trying to make a game that will net you profit so that you can continue to make games in the future, don't be following trends. It's not going to work. Because especially the bigger your game is, 2 to 3 years down the line, that trend is probably already done. Look at the massive amount of survival games that appeared after Minecraft gained popularity. Most of them failed. These smart ones took the general premise of a voxel world, like Terraria, and they made their own thing out of it. And Terraria is now one of the highest selling games of all time, and also one of the most highly rated games of all time.
Because people have done it. And both of those come from playing too many games, and you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed now. I also did a video, which factors in here, ironically enough. It's called a Zen Cone short. I'll link it below. Where, in trying to describe what's too little or too much, there's a Zen Cone about when does day end and night begin. Because it's not right when the sun sets because it's still light out. And then I did a Zen Cone, I'll link it below, about the Fiend Folio. Me being stupid and funny. Those sometimes aren't mutually exclusive.
True.
I also did a video about understanding someone else's POV, and I think that's a great reason to play other games.
Yes.
Is you can see, even if it's a game, you would never make a game like that, and it's not in the style you would do, and you don't agree with all the choices they made, it's good to play it anyway to see why they did what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I do that with Sims games, or, grand strategy games. I'm just not a fan of grand strategy games. But it's interesting to see because there is some market overlap with, some of the games that I make with the markets here, and seeing what is really popular or really well appreciated by these markets is important. If you never play The Sims, you don't really see just how much character customization or building customization is critical to these games, or being able to make your own stories, right? And you can appreciate that even if you don't really like playing those games. Or sports games, what are the moments? What are the ways that they show camera angles? How is the pacing handled in games like sports games? And you can start to get an appreciation for the design of it, even if you aren't ever going to probably design a game like that, right?
So watch that video as well. So anyway, in the 80s and 90s, I played almost every computer RPG that ever came out. And that you could do that.
Yeah, you could do that.
At most, one came out a month. Mm-hmm. And that was like in a good year.
I miss those
Even
times.
when I didn't play every computer RPG starting in the 90s, I watched friends and coworkers play them. I have a video on Interplay After Hours where we would all get together one night a week and play games. And people were often talking about some game they played. Sometimes they'd show us, hey, I just did this in Betrayal at Krondor. Let me show you. Because I remember that. I didn't play that game, but I watched someone play it who absolutely adored it. These days, though, starting in the early 2000s, I think it became impossible to play every game in a genre.
Yep.
It's now even impossible to play every game in subgenres. There's just too many things coming out. However, by the late 90s, early 2000s, I had a POV. I had a point of view. I had my lens. I knew what I wanted in my games. I had played enough games. I had made some games. I knew what I wanted to do. So in general, here's what I do now.
Yeah, and I think he's kind of glancing over that, but I think that's an important thing, that as a developer, especially as like a game designer, if you want to be a creative director, you do need to build your own lens. What is it? What's your preferred genre? What are your preferred mechanics that you want to explore? And how do you want to explore that in a unique way that hasn't been attempted before, or hasn't really been popularized, right? Like, everybody knows if they're playing a game like Dark Souls because we call it Souls-like. And who coined that? From Software. And what does From Software make? Souls-likes. they made their own subgenre of action RPG games, and now they've coined their own systems and way of maneuvering and way of battling. I mean, even if we go deeper into mechanics, their games are all mechanically based. They're all learnable. There's no accidental damage you can take in a From Software game. That is by design. You can play all their games hitless, and people have done that. This is a way that they have built their games and the way that they continue to build their games, so that when they release, Elden Ring 2 Electric Boogaloo or Dark Souls 69, you can expect, okay, I should be able to play this without ever getting hit, and I should be able to play this while being able to learn every single move of the enemies. Nice, right?
Making a game. So I have an idea, or I pull one of the ideas out of my idea book, which is quite lengthy and multi-volume now. And if I decide this is an idea I'm going to run with, I look to see what's been done.
Yes.
Because maybe a game has come out since I had that idea.
This is both like a form of competition analysis, but also just you're analyzing the playing field. Even if a game is like very different, like for Colden Chronicles, not every alchemy game is a competitor to Colden Chronicles. Not every alchemy game is an inspiration for Colden Chronicles. But I want to see, what has this done? Okay, this was a bit more of an RPG. This is closer to Colden Chronicles than some other titles. Did people like it? What did people not like about it? And I can then reformulate my position of what I'm trying to emphasize with Colden Chronicles or with its pillars to stand apart, but still be familiar enough that if I need to explain it to somebody, I can say, it's like this game plus this game. I'm still kind of struggling to do that with Colden Chronicles, admittedly, but that's the intention, is to, set that bar and find out where I am in relation to all these other titles. And sometimes you might even make a graph, especially if you're making like a simulator game. You might make a graph between like realism and something else, like how arcadey it is, how realistic, and then you might have another axis for I don't know, management fee, I don't know, whatever. But, putting this on a graph to show to publishers where you can say, okay, here's, this game. This game is more of a simulator than our game. Our game is going to be more arcadey, so it's not as, it's closer to Need for Speed, but it's still, on this quadrant of the graph. Doing things like that can help to solidify the intention that you would have with developing the game.
I check game sites. I look at game reviews. If a game comes out that's really close to my idea, I will play it because I want to see, wow, this is the setting I was thinking of and has some of the mechanics I was thinking of. I need to play this and see what I think. If it's just kind of similar, I'll watch videos of people playing. I may ask some friends if they played it. Steam is really good at that because you can go to the game and you can see which of your friends bought it. I'm always surprised when I contact some of these friends who are like, oh yeah, I bought that. I never played it. I never even installed it. And I'm like, okay.
Tim, you don't understand, Tim. Humble Bundle exists, okay? You don't understand.
Once we begin production, though, of a game, like once I'm being paid to make a game, my active game playing falls off. Sometimes to zero, but usually very, very low. And for two different reasons. One, I simply don't have the time.
Yep. Sadly.
I have talked about I get really passionate when I'm not at work playing, making or playing the game. I'm home thinking about it.
Same.
But also, I don't want to get wrapped up in some other game. I don't want to get pulled into some trend that may not be appropriate for the game I'm making, but I see how cool it is and how popular it is, and I may want to, smash it into my game, even though my game totally does not deserve it.
I mean, I can understand what Tim's saying, though. I would say that I do that. I have done that. But it's from like mechanics. It's like, oh, this is a really cool mechanic. Maybe we can fit this in, or we can, bastardize it a bit, right? I know that with Train Life, I was playing Red Dead Redemption around the same time where I played it again. I don't remember. But either way, I liked their cinematic camera, and I was like, okay, it would be cool if we could have that cinematic camera, that same style, but as you're riding the train, and it would switch between cameras, and you could just relax. We didn't end up making that, unfortunately, because 50% of that game was cut due to lack of time, unfortunately. But, I did that. Or with with Train Life, my original intention was I had just played a whole bunch of Open TTD. I got like really hooked on it, and I was like, okay, what if we take Euro Truck Sim style of light simulation and mix it with Open TTD's uh, goods production branching? Like, okay, it's perfect. Let's just you're on a train, but now you're transporting goods and you're making them into different products. Um, and that worked well. So I would say that, am I biased towards recency, what I'm playing recently? Yes. Is that necessarily a bad thing? I think that it depends. I don't think it's inherently a good or a bad thing. It's just how you use it. If I play Schedule 1, which does have some similar mechanics to Colden Chronicles, I'm not like, okay, let's copy Schedule 1. But I can see that people seem to like, in Schedule 1, the same style of minigame approach that I would like to do with Colden Chronicles. So this is an affirmation that my original intention is probably going to work with the people that might play my game. I don't know. I mean, maybe Tim means something else. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I kind of disagree with Tim on this point.
That feature does not belong in my game. Also,
you do need to filter
it. The
yeah.
gaming industry more and more every year gets involved in controversies where this is the latest outrage of the week, and whenever those happen, I wonder, is this something here to stay? Do people really not like this feature now? Or is this what they just not like right now? And next year everyone's going to go, I don't remember saying anything about that.
I don't think it's actually based on time. I mean, maybe it is a bit, but I think it's just more based on the active feel of the game. I think there's a lot of things that gamers have been upset about that maybe it's mistargeting. Maybe the issue with, I don't know. What's a good example of one of these? I mean, we could always pull like the Yasuke. I think Yasuke is an interesting example in Assassin's Creed Shadows, because the Assassin's Creed games have never been about historical accuracy necessarily. I think the issue is that Yasuke brought with him additional issues with the game, and every issue now compounds upon that initial feeling of it's weird that we're playing an Assassin's Creed game, but we aren't playing a character that was like from Japan, right? And didn't and I think the issue was compounded even further by the fact that Thomas Lockley essentially made up Yasuke's history, and so we're now playing a character who was real in history, but in a role that doesn't feel accurate. That as well. And compounding on top of that, we then had, okay, well now he can have sex with Oda Nobunaga's sister, who at the time was married and had 3 children. And it's like just all these things compound onto one, but they all kind of funnel back to an easy way to discuss it, right? Everybody is reductionist, right? It's, like, politics, like, Democrats are the problem, Republicans are the problem. And it's not like, there's no nuance to that. It's just reductionist, or reductive, sorry. And so I think that in a lot of cases with games, it becomes a reductive conversation about something that is either the core or the largest controversy within that. And I think that also there is always going to be a vocal minority for some of these things, and of course they can always push to the extremes. There was, I would say, an initial interesting and useful conversation about DEI practices in games, but then a subset of those people branched off and pulled it more extreme, where it's now just ridiculous. Like anytime there's a woman in a game, they get upset. While there's still that more reasonable, and it's the people that don't like the forced diversity as opposed to just writing a good character. So yeah, I don't know. I agree with Tim. Though I think that there's, in many cases, there is a underlying problem that might be legitimate, but it gets pulled in a million different directions, and then people nitpick small things around it, when really they it's just like, they see one big problem, and so now this problem, it matters too. But If the game was good or didn't have a big problem, these small problems would probably just be tossed to the side, right? If Schedule 1 was really buggy, then people would pick apart every single bug in that game. But because the game generally doesn't have much of an issue, people just ignore small bugs because it's like, well, it's a small bug. The game's fine otherwise. We shoot women protagonists. Can't be having that. There are no women on the internet. Yeah. Mistargeting, like they are listening to the wrong people because they are loud, but most people are fine with whatever it is. Yeah, I think there is. And there is some catering to the loud, but there's also I don't know. It's a nuanced discussion. I think every problem stems from something else. But if a game is generally seen as good, people are. I think I've said this before. If a game is generally considered to be very good, people will ignore problems that are legitimate, or even silence people trying to talk about problems that were legitimate. Like when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, there was a massive amount of people that were silencing or getting upset at people who said, well, Act 3 is pretty messy and quite buggy. It's like nobody wanted to hear that. If a game is really bad, though, and people say the opposite, they say, well, this system is pretty cool. You just get called, oh, you're a Bethesda stan, or, you're talking good things about whatever, like Starfield. It's like, well, Starfield did have some good things to it. There's no nuance. People are shit at critiquing. Yeah, I think people are just shit at critiquing. There's not really any desire for nuanced discussion. Either a game is good or it's bad. And I think that kind of lines up with the rest of society just wanting to be polarized about everything. Everything has to be polarizing. Everything has to be reductive. Nothing can be just okay. It is either a 10 or it's a 1. I mean, and you can see that with like game reviews or movie reviews, right?
So I don't want to get involved in that. I want to just make the game that was the idea I already had. I've already played a ton of games, seen what people are doing. Once I start making the game, I tend not to play a lot of other games. By the way, now that I'm semi-retired, I play games all the time.
Hey, living the dream.
I think it's funny when people on the channel go, I don't think you're a gamer anymore, because I probably play more games in a week than most of you play in a month. And I probably play more games in a day than some of you play in a week.
Damn. Dude, he's pulling it out. He's pulling his receipts out. No, but it's like, yeah, you're retired. Like what? Okay, I'm not going to say what else do you have to do, Tim. That sounds a bit rude. And that's not what I mean. But developing games does take up a lot of your time, and you have a life. You have a family, you have friends that you want to meet, things like that, a social life, things to do. And when you're retired, that is the time where you just get to sit back, rest on your laurels. And certainly, Tim, you have a lot of laurels to rest on, and just experience what the world of gaming has to offer now. I think that's cool. You're living the dream, dude. He's hitting the backlog. Apparently, he doesn't have as big of a backlog as some of us do. I'm not going to tell Tim how many games I have in my Steam library that I've never touched.
More hours, I should say, because I got a lot of time, and I live in an area that's dark and cold and wet. So I play a lot of games.
Where does Tim live? I don't want to dox him or anything. Tim Cain. Where does Tim Cain live? Maybe it says on his wiki page. No, it doesn't. I think he mentioned like Washington at one point. It could be Washington. A cavern, he's Batman. I don't know where he lives. I think he mentioned Washington at one point, so maybe he's in Washington. I'm not. I'm sorry, Tim. I don't want to know where you live. Don't worry, I will not appear outside your house.
Now, I have had it while I'm making a game. Another game developer, sometimes on my team, will turn to me incredulously and go, I can't believe you haven't played Game X, where Game X is something that came out while we were making the game. And I usually just look at them and go, yeah, I'm a little busy here making this game. And also, I usually ask them back, have you played every game? Have you played this one and this one and this one and this one? And usually they like, well, no, I haven't played all of them. I'm like, yeah, and you don't need to. Once you've kind of, you've got a approved design document, you've got a team assembled, you don't want to just keep changing direction every other week because you have.
Well, there's 100% that. I mean, if you have a vision, you need to stick to it. You need to make your pillars. You need to stick to that. You can't be changing your gameplay loop once you're in alpha stage or you're even nearing release, you don't want to change your gameplay pillars, but that's why you make those initially so that you can say, no, this is what the game is, this is our feature list, this is how the game plays. Anything else, we save it for a DLC or a sequel or whatever. But I think everybody's gonna have their own library of games that they play, and that's just fine. I mean, there's plenty of games that I'm getting to now that I just didn't get to before. Also, I'm trying to stay away from like the dopamine drip games where it's like, oh, I'm gonna spend 10,000 hours playing this game and never get to anything else. I'm trying to get away from that because I do have a backlog of games that I'm trying to play too. But yeah, it's just there's too many games coming out. You can't play them all. And I think that if you're a pretty good designer, you can watch maximum 1 hour of a game and understand pretty much everything that it's going to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to understand the story, but I can watch a trailer, I can watch 20 minutes of a game, I can understand its gameplay loop, its pillars, how it's setting itself apart, if it is setting itself apart, because there are a lot of games that just don't do anything new. But not every game needs to be completely new. Sometimes a game can just be the most excellent example of what it's trying to do that we've seen on the market. I think Ghost of Tsushima was somewhat like that. A lot of the features weren't exactly new features. They were just being done in a way that was exceptional. I mean, everything, all from its fighting, from its story to its visuals. It was a beautiful game. Pokemon is not really new each time. No, it's not. Pokemon is a good example of people hooked to nostalgia and a bit of what's the word? Sunken cost fallacy. There's also a bit of like guilt. I'm sure there's probably proper terms for these, but I don't know all of them. Feeling guilty with, hey, I'm in this group, and if I don't play the new one, then I'm not part of that group. Toys R Us kids.
To play a new
Rip
game.
Toys R Us.
So, I think it's okay if you minimize your game playing while you're making a game. And also, this just isn't true for design. This is true for art and code. I can't say a lot for art, but I can tell you that if you pay too little attention to what's going on, it's a problem.
I have worked with programmers that didn't really play games, and I'm sorry, but they could maybe like solve bugs well. But I wouldn't want somebody who is a gameplay programmer to not be playing games, because I'm sorry, it's like I need you to know what the trends are for systems so that when we're making this together, we can both go back and forth about how a game, or I can use a popular game to explain how something works, and you can either already know about it, which saves us both time, or you can extrapolate by watching a video. But if you aren't really familiar with how games programming works, it's going to be a problem. It's just, let's be efficient, and sometimes the most efficient way is to say, well, do you know how this game works, right? And if it's a popular enough game, I would assume that most people, by and large, know how that game works, or can watch 10, 20 minutes of the gameplay and be like, oh yeah, I see how that system is working, and it can recreate it. But also just knowing, again, this is less to do with what Tim Cain is saying, but if you don't know how designers work as a programmer, you're not going to know what variables to expose, or how to structure that data, or whether or not to expose it in a way that can be easily imported from like a CSV or something that the designer can't import from a CSV. And the designer should be dictating some of that too, right? It shouldn't be just all on the programmer, but there might be some things that the designer misses that the programmer's like, oh yeah, I exposed these variables for you too. Thank you for doing that. I forgot to put those in the document. You need to work in tandem, and the designer can't just be sitting above and the programmer is just twiddling his or her thumbs until the design document comes down. There does need to be some give and take here, and some creative input and output. Unlike games, you've only been playing them for 30-ish years.
And if you try to slavishly follow everything that's going on, it's a problem. Too little, you miss what people are liking and disliking. Yep. Too much, you get sucked into trends and controversies. For programmers, I see them make this mistake all the time. I've literally worked with a programmer who was like, I'm just going to allocate memory when I need it. Exactly what I need, allocate the exact amount, use it and throw it away. Hello, memory fragmentation. So that happened. He was like, that's it. I'm pre-allocating everything. I'm never going to dynamically allocate. I'm pre-allocating everything at the start. Hello, buffer overflow. So then he was like, that's it. I'm going to do both. You want to pre-allocate some things. I want to use dynamic allocation for other things. Hello, both problems at once. It was weird to watch him get so frustrated. And I'm like,
Boomer
no,
problems.
these problems you're running into are known. All programmers run into them. You have to deal with it. You, but that's a whole other video. Anyway, and then the flip side, I mentioned if you watch too much, you can easily get overwhelmed and you'll never get anything done because you're spending all your time going, oh no, this video came out and it's in a similar setting. Or oh no, this video came out and it's also turn-based RPG. I need to play it. I need to play it. You'll never get anything done, especially now with so many games coming out. I think it's what, 1,700 or so a week. I forget. It's a lot.
I mean, I can give an example. I mean, it's just you have to do your best to extrapolate, right? So let me try to look up something that I know exists, but I don't know anything about. This is the new one, right? Mario Kart World. Does anybody have like some of the exploration gameplay of the new Mario Kart? You know, if this is the open world, you know, I can already extrapolate that, okay, you get to explore the courses that you'll be able to drive in, well, maybe not. I don't know. But if I see some like exploration gameplay or something, I can be like, okay, I can see how this works. I can see what their intention is. You know, they're going to be spawning some things on the circuits while you're exploring. You might have some things to collect, you know, coins to collect. Maybe each region has its own progression. Different items, maybe different secrets that you can find, things like that. I can extrapolate that and say, okay, I get how this open world is designed. It's pretty standard. It's probably how I would design it because it's a very casual audience that's going to be playing this game, or a very wide audience, but it's still a casual game. And I wouldn't want it to lock anything behind there, but maybe unlock some cosmetics or things like that, but nothing gameplay related. And then I can figure out, okay, now I don't need to play this game. I don't need to spend $90 on this game. I get how it works. My noisy neighbors understand how it works. It's easy to make sense. But if you never played, you would never give the feel of Neo Drift. Well, I mean, this is true. Sometimes games are either better to play than watch, or you're never going to understand how they play until you play it in person. There's plenty of games like that. You just need to determine, do you want to play this game because you want to understand how it feels to play, or you're just trying to figure out what it's doing? And you don't necessarily need to play it to understand what it's doing, but you might not appreciate certain aspects until you play it yourself, of course.
Not going to be able to do this. You're just, give it up. You cannot do this. My recommendation then, to people who are watching this who are game devs or wanting to get into game devs.
That's us.
Play enough games that you figure out what it is you like. You find your own style. You find your point of view, your POV. And this may take a while. And that's fine. I was in the industry for 13 years before I started making Fallout. So it took me almost a decade and a half to really come up with like, okay, I like games with reactivity, and I like games with multiple solutions, and I like games where you can make your own character. You're not handed one. That was my POV.
Same, Tim.
Find that. I call it your happy place. Find your happy place and then live there. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Don't worry about you're missing out on the next big thing. You may be the next big thing. So don't worry too much, but do try to have a good foundation.
I don't want to toot my own horn. No. I think you should check your ego, but he's right. Just that's all noise. It's all noise, and it's not like there's one successful developer of RPG games or of racing games or of arcade games or simulation games or visual novels. There's plenty of developers out there, and just because you aren't one of those developers doesn't mean that you will never be one of those developers that's making successful games like that. But a lot of it is noise, a lot of it is faff, and if you can find that unique style and it is marketable, and it turns out that there's a pretty large audience for it, you will find success if you remain perseverant and passionate. And most developers, unfortunately, aren't very perseverant, and the ones that are, tend to become dispassionate because the industry is very competitive and you will get abused if you're passionate. You know, I hate to say it. Not that I want it to happen, but it will happen because passion gets weaponized all the time in the industry. VLC Daniel, thank you for the follow. You a VLC dev?
Foundation in what you've played. And I hope that answered your question, Amir Hussein Magsudi 388.
That was a good video. Very good video. And I agree with most of the things Tim said in that, but I do disagree with some of the things. Although I think that there's just different points of view on some of this stuff. So that was a good video. Guys, go give Tim a like and subscribe. Here's the link to the video yourself. And if you're watching on YouTube, the link is always beneath the description. Oh, nah, it's just from your name? Okay. Nah, just... Alright, guys. Thanks for watching that one. And if you're watching on YouTube, I will catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye, YouTube.